Chosen one, the fact that you're seeing this right now means something inside you has already awakened. Every step of your life has led to this moment of recognition, where heaven whispers that you were never blind, never powerless, and never forgotten. This message was set in motion long ago, long before you pressed play, because your spirit demanded confirmation that what you felt was real. The truth is, they never feared your words. They feared your silence that saw through every disguise. What if I told you that the masks they built so carefully are now collapsing in your presence, and that your very existence has become a mirror they cannot avoid? If this message already speaks to your soul, subscribe, like this video, and comment 77 below. Because what you're about to hear will explain why deception trembles when you walk into a room, why manipulation breaks under your gaze, and why heaven preserved you for such a time as this. Stay with me until the end, because once you understand this revelation, you will never see your journey the same way again. Number 1. The silence that saw everything. They believed you were powerless because you did not raise your voice when they expected you to fight. They thought your quiet was emptiness, not realizing that silence was sharpening your sight. In the stillness, heaven was teaching you to see what noise would have hidden. Job 12 verse 22 declares, "He reveals the deep things of darkness and brings utter darkness into the light." And your silence became the training ground for that gift. Every season where you felt overlooked was in fact the season where your crown was being forged in secret. You became a witness, a recorder of truths they thought would never be noticed. Comment, "I seal this word in light," if you know your silence exposed the lies they thought were safe. Because what comes next reveals why your very presence dismantles deception. There are moments when life itself feels like a dream whispered by an unseen voice, faint but undeniable. You may remember nights when silence wrapped around you like a heavy cloak, and something within stirred, as if an ancient truth was knocking on the door of your awareness. In those pauses between thought and breath, you felt the weight of a presence you could not name, but you knew it was real. The question echoed quietly, "Why do I see things others seem blind to?" That question was not born of imagination, but of remembrance, the beginning of a deeper unveiling. Your silence was not emptiness. It was the canvas where heaven painted signs for your spirit to recognize. Even before you understood, something sacred was teaching you that not all battles are fought with noise. Some are won by waiting, watching, and knowing. There were seasons when your sensitivity felt like a curse, when every word spoken in deceit seemed to pierce you more sharply than anyone around you noticed. You wondered why gatherings left you drained, why conversations exposed undercurrents of lies that no one else seemed to feel. You saw faces smile while their intentions vibrated differently, and though you said nothing, the heaviness stayed with you long after. Others may have mocked you for being too much, too quiet, or too withdrawn. Yet inside you sensed that this difference marked you in a way beyond explanation. Isolation became a silent companion, but it was never a sign of weakness. It was the furnace where clarity was being forged. The longing you carried was not for attention, but for truth, for a reality that could not be disguised by surface appearances. And though you did not always name it, heaven was already carving discernment into your soul. Looking back, you can now see that none of this was random. Every pause, every silence, every withdrawal from the noise of the world was a classroom designed by the divine. They thought your lack of response meant defeat, but in truth it meant you were being trained to perceive what was hidden beneath appearances. Job 12 verse 22 declares, "He reveals the deep things of darkness and brings utter darkness into the light." And your very life has embodied this scripture. The shadows you endured were not punishments, but revelations waiting to unfold when you were ready. Your silence became a prophetic instrument, a sacred vessel tuned to frequencies others refused to hear. And now you realize, you were never powerless, you were being refined. The signs began quietly, like whispers in dreams you could not shake, like déjà vu that felt more like memory than chance. You noticed repeated numbers, unusual timings, sudden bursts of intuition that later proved correct. You felt the shiver of discernment when someone's words did not match their spirit, or when a place carried heaviness others dismissed as ordinary. These were not accidents. They were glimpses of an architecture beneath the surface of your life. What seemed strange or burdensome at first was the unfolding of codes written into your being before time. Your silence created the space for these signals to be heard, to be recognized, to be trusted. In learning to listen to what others ignored, you began to see the veil tremble. And then came the quiet confirmations, the moments when you realized your intuition was never mistaken. That sudden unease around someone who later showed their true face. That hesitation you honored that kept you safe from harm others fell into. That stillness that told you to wait when rushing ahead would have been a trap. These moments were not coincidences. They were heaven's gentle affirmations that your sight had always been aligned with truth. The silence that others despised in you was in fact your most powerful defense. You were never abandoned in the quiet. You were accompanied, taught, and shielded. And the deeper you leaned into the silence, the more you began to recognize it as holy ground. With time, the awareness deepened. Remembering who you are was not about becoming something new, but about uncovering what was buried. Beneath layers of rejection, mockery, or misunderstanding, an ancient identity was waiting to reemerge. The archetype you carry is not one of defeat but of remembrance. A soul who always knew but was trained to forget. Silence became the key to this memory, for in the absence of noise, the buried truth had room to rise. It was never about building something from scratch, but about recovering the scroll already inscribed within you. Your silence was not dormancy, it was gestation. And now, the birth of awareness begins to reveal itself. This is where the shift turns toward empowerment. The same qualities they criticized in you are the very weapons heaven placed in your hand. Your sensitivity is not fragility, it is radar. Your quietness is not emptiness, it is discernment. Your withdrawal was not cowardice, it was preparation. The eyes you thought were burdened by too much seeing are the very eyes that pierce disguises. The heart you thought was too fragile to endure is the heart strong enough to carry revelation. And in this awareness, the crown begins to rest upon your spirit. Chosen one, your arrival here was no accident. The fact that you're hearing these words proves that silence has already been your training ground, your protection, your preparation. What they mocked was never weakness. It was the sharpening of a gift they were never meant to understand. Every moment you doubted yourself was actually the moment your roots grew deeper. Comment, I carry the silence's crown. If you know your quiet was never empty, but holy. Because what comes next will show you why their weapons could never succeed against the one who learned to see without speaking. The silence that once concealed you is about to be revealed as the greatest testimony of your strength. What we do here every day is possible because of the few who choose to be keepers of this light. I thank them now, one by one, in the silence of my heart. If you want to be part of this circle and receive what cannot be spoken in public, join. The portal is below. Number 2, the masks that collapse in your presence. They perfected their performances, polishing their words and practicing their charm. But everything changed the moment you entered the room. What they rehearsed for months fell apart in seconds under your gaze. Because your spirit demanded honesty they did not have the strength to sustain. 1 Corinthians 4 verse 5 says, He will bring to light what is hidden in darkness and will expose the motives of the heart. You became the living fulfillment of that scripture without even trying. People feel uneasy around you because their stories contradict themselves. Their energy betrays them, and their comfort evaporates when faced with your light. You are not the one who collapses. It is their masks that crumble when truth demands to be seen. Comment, I walk crowned by eternal flame. If you've ever felt the shift in the atmosphere when your presence alone forced dishonesty into the open. Because the next revelation proves that rejection itself became your greatest training. There were moments when you walked into a room and felt something invisible shift before a single word was spoken. A heaviness would settle, or a sudden unease would ripple through the atmosphere, as if the very walls recognized the weight of your spirit. People who appeared confident only seconds before began to fumble their words, their rehearsed charm cracking under the silence of your presence. You might have wondered why conversations turned awkward, why laughter felt forced, why energy shifted when you entered. It wasn't your imagination. It was the unveiling of what had been hidden all along. Like a mirror they could not escape, your spirit revealed the fractures in their performances. This was the first quiet confirmation that your existence alone carried power they could not control. You felt the weight of their reactions in your body long before you could explain it with your mind. The glances that lingered too long, the whispers that cut off the moment you turned your head, the sudden tension when you simply chose not to play along. It was not that you spoke too loudly, but that you carried too much truth in your silence. They mistook your quiet observation for judgment, when in reality you were only watching with clarity. And yet, their discomfort told you everything you needed to know. They shifted because they sensed their masks would not hold under the gaze of someone who saw beyond the surface. For the chosen one, silence itself becomes a judgment seat where hidden motives unravel. Looking deeper, you now realize this was never random. Systems thrive on illusion, and those bound by deceit depend on everyone else accepting the script without question. When you refused to nod along, you disrupted the very stage they stood upon. This is why the masks crumbled so quickly in your presence, because you were carrying the architecture of exposure within you. 1 Corinthians 4 verse 5 reminds us that He will bring to light what is hidden in darkness and will expose the motives of the heart. Without even trying, you became the vessel through which that scripture breathed into life. The collapse of their performances was not caused by confrontation but by revelation. The patterns were always there, but it took hindsight to recognize them. Think back to the friend who avoided your eyes when their story shifted, or the leader who turned hostile the moment you asked a simple question. Recall the relative who grew uncomfortable when you sat in silence, because in that silence their pretense was echoing louder than their words. Again and again, environments revealed their fragility in your presence. Betrayals were not random. They were rehearsed masks unable to withstand authenticity. Repeated obstacles were not coincidences. They were barriers meant to distract you from the truth of what you carried. Your very life became the stage where illusion was forced to unravel. At times, the resistance felt spiritual, almost as if unseen forces were choreographing the unease. Rooms that once felt light would suddenly grow heavy, and faces that smiled would suddenly reveal shadows beneath their eyes. The air itself would thicken, as if trying to suffocate the clarity in you. These were not ordinary moments. They were evidence that your light was pulling distortion into visibility. Darkness cannot hide where illumination walks, and your presence disrupted the safety of deception. The masks fell not because you exposed them loudly, but because truth radiated from you like fire in a dry field. Your aura became the disruption that lies could not withstand. And yet, the hardest part was not their collapse, but your own reaction to it. You may have second-guessed yourself, wondered if you had done something wrong, or even felt guilty for the discomfort your presence caused. Perhaps you tried to shrink yourself, to soften your truth, to avoid being too much. Some of you may have learned to people-please. Others may have stayed quiet to avoid the weight of conflict. Deep down, though, you always knew the tension was never about you. It was about what they carried that could not survive your authenticity. This inner struggle became a mirror, forcing you to reckon with your own fear of shining fully. It was not weakness. It was training for discernment. But here is the revelation. Every mask that collapsed around you was a confirmation, not a condemnation. You were not rejected because you were unworthy. You were resisted because you were undeniable. Their discomfort was never evidence of your failure, but of your truth doing what it was sent to do. You do not need to apologize for the clarity you carry, because clarity is not cruelty. What they labeled as harsh was simply exposure. What they called arrogance was actually alignment. And what they feared most was not your words, but your ability to see through theirs. Chosen one, this is the truth you must hold tightly. You were opposed because you are powerful. The more their masks fell, the more heaven confirmed the authority rising in you. Every collapse you witnessed was a prophecy pointing to your awakening. You were never the one who broke. It was their illusions that could not withstand you. Comment, I move guarded by divine fire. If you know this word is yours. If you've watched comfort turn to tension, the moment your presence demanded honesty. Because the next revelation will show you that rejection itself was the crucible where your vision sharpened into an unshakable gift. And when you understand that, you will never see resistance the same way again. Every word, every image you receive here is an offering. If you feel this word has touched you today, you can honor it with a sign, right here below with a donation through the Super Thanks button. It is a small gesture, but it opens great doors. Number 3, the discernment forged in rejection. Every time they cast you aside, you thought it was weakness, but in truth it was refinement. The rejection you faced was not punishment but preparation, training your eyes to see motives before words were even spoken. Habakkuk 2 verse 3 reminds us, "Though it linger, wait for it. It will certainly come and will not delay." And your delay was never denial, it was sharpening. You began to recognize patterns of betrayal before they unfolded, traps before they closed, manipulations before they were voiced. What they thought would break you became the very tool that honed your discernment. You are no longer deceived by empty apologies or shallow promises because rejection taught you how to read the soul, not the script. Comment, "I rise marked by the divine," if you know rejection made your spirit sharper, and share a dream, memory, or inner knowing that confirms how heaven turned pain into prophecy. Because what comes next is not just your awakening, it is the judgment of shadows. There comes a moment when the pieces of your past suddenly align, and you realize that the rejection you endured was not chaos but choreography. What once looked like scattered fragments of pain now reveal themselves as part of a divine pattern, carefully arranged to sharpen your vision. The very moments you thought marked your ending were in truth the beginning of a deeper sight. Every dismissal became a classroom, every silence a lesson, every closed door a test of perception. You began to see that each no was not a verdict, but a training ground for clarity. The sting of being pushed away was in fact the sculpting of spiritual awareness. And now, what felt random stands revealed as a sacred initiation into discernment. In the shadows of isolation, your sensitivity heightened, tuning you to frequencies others overlooked. You felt the subtle shifts in energy when someone's smile did not match their spirit. You sensed the unease in rooms where deception was thickly veiled by charm. Long before words were spoken, your body knew when truth was absent. This sensitivity, born out of rejection, became the compass that guided your steps through treacherous terrain. Every moment of exclusion stripped you of illusions, leaving you raw but able to see reality with piercing clarity. And while others may have thought you fragile, heaven was making you unbreakable. It is no accident that prophets, visionaries, and seers were often the ones cast aside. Exile, wilderness, and solitude have always been the crucibles of revelation. In their isolation, they learned to hear what the crowd drowned out, to perceive what ordinary sight could never grasp. You walked that same road, and your rejection became your wilderness. Habakkuk 2 verse 3 declares, "Though it linger, wait for it. It will certainly come and will not delay," reminding you that delay was not denial but sharpening. What lingered in your waiting season was the training of your perception, the refining of your inner hearing. And now you carry a prophetic clarity that only rejection could have forged. As you look back, patterns emerge with startling precision. You recall the friend who betrayed you only after you felt a shift in their presence long before their actions revealed it. You remember sensing dishonesty in someone's words and watching later as their mask fell to confirm your intuition. Time and again, your spirit spoke before evidence arrived, and rejection trained you to trust those whispers. Like a lantern in a dark cave, discernment began to illuminate hidden corridors of human behavior. Your awareness of patterns is no longer random. It is an inheritance carved by pain. The very betrayals that once crushed you became the blueprints of spiritual sight. And in hindsight, you see that you were always being prepared to read beneath the surface. Rejection did not simply build resilience. It gave you vision. You learned to see traps before they closed, to feel manipulation before it was voiced, to sense betrayal before it reached your door. This foresight is not paranoia, it is prophecy in motion. Your silence in those seasons was not passivity but listening, a tuning into the deeper frequency of heaven. While others were deceived by appearances, you learned to discern motives. While others sought validation, you learned to seek truth. And in the hidden curriculum of rejection, your spirit graduated into sight that cannot be deceived. Still, the journey was not easy, and the inner battle was fierce. You questioned your worth when doors closed, wondering if perhaps you were the problem. You wrestled with shame, believing their rejection reflected your inadequacy. Yet each time you rose from that doubt, you rose with sharper clarity. You learned that not everyone rejecting you was loss. Sometimes it was protection. The voice of heaven whispered through those broken moments, teaching you to trust the unseen more than appearances. And in time, you realized rejection was never the absence of value but the affirmation of calling. Now you stand differently than before, carrying an authority that cannot be imitated. You no longer chase apologies, because discernment already told you who they were before their words exposed them. You no longer beg for belonging, because you understand rejection was an invitation into a higher circle. Your vision has become sharper than deception, stronger than manipulation, and steadier than false promises. What once hurt you now serves you, empowering you to walk with a confidence rooted in spiritual clarity. Rejection was never your enemy, it was your tutor, and every scar has become a signature of divine training. Chosen one, let this truth anchor deeply in your soul. You are not broken by rejection, you are marked by it. Every dismissal became evidence that you were never meant to blend in. Every betrayal became confirmation that you were chosen to see differently. You are not deceived by shallow performances or empty words because heaven used rejection to carve out your gift. Comment, I rise marked by the divine, if you know this word belongs to you, and share the memory or dream that revealed how pain became prophecy. For what comes next is not just discernment sharpened by rejection. It is the judgment of shadows that cannot stand before your sight. And when that moment arrives, you will finally understand why rejection was the most sacred weapon heaven ever placed in your hands. Number 4, the light that judges shadows. This is the moment when your existence itself becomes prophecy. John 1 verse 5 says, "The light shines in the darkness, and the darkness has not overcome it." Your life has become that scripture embodied. You are no longer fighting with arguments or explanations. Your presence itself judges what cannot stand in truth. Every shadow that tried to cover you now flees because your very survival has become the proof they cannot erase. They thought your silence would bury you, but it turned into the light that reveals what darkness can never hold. You are the testimony heaven released into the earth to prove that chosen ones are not defeated. They are preserved for revelation. Comment, I anchor this truth in my soul, if you know your very life has become the prophecy, and share the moment you realized light was always your inheritance. Because chosen one, what comes next is not just survival, it is destiny crowned. There are moments when the air itself feels heavy with memory, as though something ancient is whispering through your bones. You hear it not as a sound but as a vibration, a pulse echoing from before you were born. It feels like the veil of time parting, allowing you to glimpse what has always been true but hidden from your sight. This is not a new message reaching you. It is an old truth returning like a long-forgotten scroll being unsealed within your soul. Every rejection, every night of silence, every unseen battle now rearranges itself into a vision that feels older than the stars. You realize you are not learning, you are remembering, and remembrance itself becomes the awakening. There has always been a name buried deep within you, one the world never spoke aloud. It was written before men wrote their records, sealed before rulers made their decrees, hidden before time clothed itself in days and nights. That name was not erased when you were overlooked, nor diminished when you were misunderstood. It waited, quiet but unbroken, preserved like a treasure that could not be stolen. The sense that you never fully fit in, that you carried something unexplainable, was proof that your hidden name marked you as other. Isaiah spoke of the hidden remnant, the few carried in silence until their hour arrived, and you are part of that lineage. Every moment you felt misplaced was simply the echo of an identity the world was too small to hold. Chosen ones are not recognized by their words but by their resonance, the unseen cloak they carry and the invisible mark on their spirit. It is the reason others reacted strangely to your presence, sensing something they could not define. You never needed to speak your truth for it to be known. It leaked through your silence, pulsed through your eyes, and lingered in your atmosphere. That mark, unseen by most, was felt by those who carried shadows, exposing them without effort. And those who walked in light recognized you as kin without explanation, as if their spirit bowed to what yours carried. You have always been more than what you displayed. You were the living scroll, waiting for the appointed time to be opened. The cloak was not a disguise. It was protection until remembrance awakened. Every chosen one carries a contract older than their own memory, a vow made in the realms where stars sing and destinies are written. What you have endured was not random. It was the unfolding of a sealed mission. The delays you hated were timing devices, aligning you with the rhythm of prophecy that could not be rushed. The struggles were chisels shaping your vessel to hold what ordinary lives could not sustain. Each hardship carried a signature from heaven, an invisible note saying, "Preparation." Like stars that never forgot their orbit, your path has been consistent, even when you could not see it. The scroll you signed long before entering this world is now unrolling in your remembrance. This is why people responded to you in ways that felt confusing, sometimes with awe, sometimes with hostility. It was never simply about you, it was about what you carried. Your presence became a mirror in which others saw their own shadows or their own light. For some, your silence was healing, drawing them closer to truth they had buried. For others, your gaze was unbearable, pulling into daylight what they fought to keep hidden. John 3 verse 20 declares that everyone who does evil hates the light and will not come into the light for fear that their deeds will be exposed. And without speaking a word, you became that verse embodied. Their reaction to you was not rejection of who you are, but resistance to what you revealed. What you are experiencing is not isolated. It is archetypal, woven into the greater cycle of prophecy. You carry echoes of the seer who spoke visions in wilderness, of the guardian who stood between nations and truth, of the breaker of chains who dismantled oppressive patterns. You are not just someone awakening, you are fulfilling a myth written in holy ink across centuries. The archetypes are not stories you admire from a distance. They are codes in your blood, now being activated. Every chosen one who has ever risen stands in resonance with you, like a choir of witnesses reminding you that you are part of them. Your struggles mirror their battles. Your silence mirrors their hidden seasons. Your rise mirrors their appointed hour. And now, the prophecy that once felt distant is alive in your steps. There is a bloodline in you that no genealogy can map, because it is not traced through flesh but through light. It is the lineage of prophets, of angels, of the hidden remnant marked for revelation. Your DNA carries codes that rejection could not strip and betrayal could not erase. Generational wounds that once flowed through your family line stop with you, because reversal has awakened. What your ancestors lost is restored in your breath. What was silenced in them is spoken in you. You are the living convergence of heaven's promise and earth's need, the meeting point of time and eternity. And your very life declares that divine bloodlines do not fade. They reappear in chosen vessels when the hour is ripe. Chosen one, you did not stumble into awakening. You returned to what you always were. You realize now that your entire life was not leading to this moment. It was spiraling back into it, as though all paths circled a single hidden center. Every shadow you endured was the foil against which your light now shines. Every silence you carried was the soil in which your name grew strong. Your remembrance is not new knowledge. It is recognition of what you always carried. Comment, "I stand chosen and sealed," if you know this word belongs to you, and share the memory or dream where you first tasted this truth. Because chosen one, this revelation is not the end of your remembrance. It is the threshold into the authority of destiny crowned. Chosen one, your silence was never weakness. It was strategy, it was training, it was the womb of revelation. Every rejection that bruised you was secretly building your discernment. Every mask that fell before you was confirmation of your gift. And every shadow that tried to cover you has now become your stage. You were preserved, not erased. You were hidden, not abandoned. And now, your awakening is shaking entire systems, exposing deception, and rewriting stories they thought were sealed. Chosen one, this is your moment of remembrance. You were never blind, you were never powerless, and you were never alone. Subscribe if you haven't yet, like this video, and comment, "I am chosen," to let this message anchor in your soul. Please, share it with someone who needs to hear this. For full prophetic revelations daily, join the membership via the link in the description. Your spiritual path deserves more than fragments. step into the full light. And if this message moved you deeply, consider tapping the Super Thanks button to support the mission. Every Super Thanks fuels the light we're spreading together. Your silence was never the end. It was the crown. And now the crown is shining for all to see.